You got a little something there, you know? If you've watched my previous videos and possess a bit of a keen eye, if you look to the back shelf there, you'll likely have noted that I'm a pretty big fan of tabletop role-playing games.
Look at this. That's some games right there.
I've played tabletop RPGs for the better part of a decade now. Actually, probably over a decade. I'm old. And I have watched how the discourse around these games has shifted, particularly around the concept of what I have heard called, and what I personally like to call, beer and pretzels, Dungeons and Dragons. It's the style of game where the story really doesn't matter. It's just the necessary world building for why people are in this dungeon at this time. You are essentially playing the game for fun and experimentation, because why not? It is a game.
It's only a game.
I personally haven't got to play a session like that in a very long time. But there is a video game that came out in 2015 that I only started playing recently that has managed to scratch that itch for me. And that game is called Barony. Oh, by the way, if you end up liking this video, don't forget to do the YouTube thing. I always forget to mention this. YouTube literally emailed me with tips telling me to mention this more, so as Susan says, suplex that like button, face roll your keyboard for a comment, and slap that subscribe button. And you can quote her. Thank you so much. There are many reasons to play a game. And gaming communities with large followings are no strangers to people telling other people in said community that there are right ways and wrong ways to play a game. To save you so much time, long story short, the only arguments that hold any weight are the ones that essentially say this, but not quite as bluntly, as long as you aren't being a dick, there's no wrong way to play the game as long as you are following some form of rules and everybody who sits at the table gets what they signed up for. Which is true. That is my entire stance on running tabletop RPGs for people. People gotta enjoy themselves, and that takes many forms. I wholeheartedly support this point. Seems like a no-brainer. Today, we are talking about Beer and Pretzels D&D, which is essentially an adventure for the sake of it. For example, a crawl through a treacherous dungeon where the dungeon master can let loose a bit and make the most evil dungeon they can, where the players sit down with the knowledge that their characters will likely not survive, so they can experiment with making overpowered, weird, or silly builds they wanted to try, and they can bring backup characters so that if their first character perishes in the dungeon, they can just spawn in as another character and keep the crawl going. You fight monsters, solve puzzles, loot treasure. It's great fun. Except for you, Tomb of Horrors, you are made by a man who did not like the people at his table. You gotta do this kind of game with love, otherwise your players are gonna hate you. In my time watching people talking about Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of people started throwing shame towards playing Dungeons and Dragons the Beer and Pretzels way, saying it wasn't fun, wasn't fulfilling, wasn't interesting, which is not only incorrect, but also not a cool thing to do. It's not cool. RPG games don't always have to be an operatic epic of cosmic scale where you explore not just the intricacies of political conflicts between nations, but also the questions of what it means to be human itself. Sometimes, I'm gonna grab a big stick, smack some bad guys with it, dodge some traps, solve some puzzles. Couldn't be me though, I'm really bad at puzzles. I love the critical role approach to Dungeons and Dragons as much as the next guy. But there is a special place in my heart for just running the game for the sake of it. And truth be told, I miss it. As said earlier, I haven't done a Beer and Pretzel style game in a long time. With regards to TTRPGs, that's where these games began. You know, they were just made to simulate combat and a dungeon exploration. There wasn't really much consideration for story. That mentality is where the game initially began in its earlier editions, but over time, as more editions got released, it has shifted more towards roleplay heavy storytelling. That's obviously the natural evolution of these things, but it has come at the cost of losing some of that crunchiness of game mechanics that makes running a session of Beer and Pretzels D&D exciting and unpredictable and worth trying. At the end of the day, the game loop of fight, loot, run, repeat has always been satisfying. Barony is a game that manages to tap into that fun, that crunchiness, that spontaneity through its gameplay. And with that said, let's talk about it. Imagine, if you will, that a boomer shooter was combined with Minecraft and then got shoved into a Dungeons and Dragons setting. It sounds pretty neat, right? It is. The goal of the gameplay is simple. Survive the dungeon. Fight its denizens. Level up and then defeat the big boss at the end of it. Or bosses in this game's case. It's a classic, basic RPG design. A tried and true formula that has proven time and time again to be very entertaining. Throw in the fact that the dungeon floor layouts are different each time you play, and that loot drops and enemy spawns are different, and there are some legendary enemies that can spawn in and drop cool loot, and you have yourself enough variance in the game loop to warrant plenty of replayability. Add in the fact that there are a lot of classes to try in the base game, even more with the downloadable content, and a bunch of playable races with different buffs and debuffs to try out, and you have an addicting time sink to dive into and master. Classes in Barony act as starting character attributes, aka stats, which affect a lot of things. These stats being strength,
Yeah, buddy! Wait!
which improves melee attack damage and your speed while carrying a lot of things, dexterity, which improves ranged weapon damage and your movement speed while carrying less stuff, constitution, which improves your armor class, making you harder to damage. It also makes you recover from negative status effects quicker and makes you heal more from healing potions, intelligence,
The power within.
which increases your spell power and mana regen, making you better at casting spells and learning spells, and it also improves how much mana you get from potions that restore it. Perception, which improves armor piercing with ranged weaponry, increases the effects of tinkering and appraisal skills, which we'll talk about later, and helps you see better in the dark. And lastly, charisma, which improves the prices of things when you are trading with a shopkeeper, and increases the leadership and trading skills, which we will also talk about later. Classes affect starting skill values. They affect starting health and mana point values, as well as the amount of extra HP and MP that you get when leveling up, what weapons you start with, what miscellaneous gear you start with, and in some cases, what spells you start with. This leads to different classes having different strengths and different weaknesses in the early game and late game. In single player, there is a bit of an issue. Some of the classes can become a bit homogenized on your own because of the fact that on your own you get all of the XP, and therefore you can get highly leveled enough to do anything that you devote your time specializing into and mastering. But in multiplayer, the classes are very distinct. That's right, this game has multiplayer, up to 4 players. Highly recommend trying it. The classes are very distinct in multiplayer because multiple characters are sharing the experience points, and therefore there's less to go around, and therefore nobody can become a god of everything. To complete a run of this game, you have to complete a minimum of 35 floors of monsters, traps, and furniture to break. If you do some investigating, you may stumble upon one of the game's many additional secret floors that offer more loot, legendary gear, more loot, more enemies to defeat for more experience points, more levels. Oh, and did I mention more loot? As a guy who typically doesn't like doing puzzles, I like the ones in this game. Okay? They go quick and they're a lot of fun. And they remind me of puzzles that you would see in a Dungeons and Dragons session. Getting to be inserted into those puzzles directly is a great time and perfectly fitting with the style of gameplay that Barony is going for. This assumes, however, that you are going to complete the game every run. And let me tell you something, you're not going to complete the game every run. You're going to lose at this game so many times. Like all other roguelike games, losing and trying again is the learning process of the game. And because starting over in this game is not a huge loss, unless you make it really far in the dungeon, starting fresh feels fun in this game. Add in the chance to get better loot next time, tapping into my love of gambling mechanics that don't touch my actual wallet, and oh yeah, I'm gonna be playing this game a lot. Another aspect of the game that enhances the replayability is the large variety of weapons and spells. Look at how many spells there are in this game. Not much else to say on that front, other than all builds can succeed assuming you plan well, properly level your skills, and you play smart. And you make sure to respect the Minotaur. There will come a point later down the line when you don't have to, but... Oh my God! One funny thing this game does, before we move on, is that when you go to close the game, it either goads you into playing more, or it makes a funny joke of some kind. This is the kind of playful attitude that permeates Barony, and only makes the game more fun. And it's the kind of attitude that you need to have where if you were to run a real-life D&D session of like a dungeon crawl like this, you would also ideally have at the table. Which is why this game is so charming. It knows what it is. It knows that it is a treacherous run through a hell dungeon, but but it's funny, it's charming along the way, and it doesn't make you feel bad when you lose. That if it was in any way pretentious or just off-putting in any way, this game would not be as good as it is. But because the game doesn't take itself too seriously, it's perfect. Every RPG needs skills to make characters feel distinct, and Barony has quite a few. Some combat skills and some non-combat skills. Let's name them off. Swimming, level this by hanging out in the water.
2 bros chilling in the hot tub, 5 feet apart cause they're not gay.
Level this so that you get better at swimming and eventually become so good at swimming that you ascend and become able to walk on water itself. And lava. Leadership. Level this by recruiting NPCs and keeping them alive while fighting things. This skill buffs your followers' movement speed, increases the amount of followers you can have at one time, makes charming magic effects better, and eventually lets you recruit some enemies into your squad. Trading. Level this by buying things from shopkeepers to reduce the markup and resale penalty at shops. Also, so that you can eventually sell whatever you want to whatever kind of merchant you want, regardless of what they normally sell. That's some Wolf of Wall Street type shit. Appraisal. Level this by appraising things so that you can get better at appraising things. And then you can appraise more things, to the point where you can appraise everything. In this game, in which looting things is very important, this is a great skill to have. Also in this game, when you pick up an item, you don't know everything that it does, or if it has been cursed or blessed, unless it is appraised. Tinkering. Level this by salvaging things, disarming traps, lockpicking, also making and repairing items with a tinkering kit so that you can be better at doing those two things. And also that eventually when you max the skill out, you can repair most things. Alchemy. Level this by brewing, drinking, and throwing potions at people so that you can be better at all of those things, as well as being able to use more ingredients to brew. And eventually, when you max the skill out, your alembics, aka your brewer's tools, will never break and all of your potions will just be better all around.
And nothing can go wrong. Oh no, it all went wrong!
Magic. Level this by casting and learning magic to increase spell power and learn more spells, and eventually learn the unbelievably busted Dominate spell. Casting. Level this by casting spells to get better at casting spells and stop fumbling your spells, because yes, it is possible to not have spells work because your casting level is so low. It makes anybody who is dabbling in magic have something to worry about in the early game. Eventually, when you max out the casting skill, you get the spell Force Bolt as a cantrip, aka you can cast it forever and never spend mana to do it. Stealth. Learn this by sneaking up on enemies and attacking them. Eventually, you get so good at sneaking that you just straight up turn invisible.
Dude, how long have you been standing there?
An hour.
An hour?
Also, your sneak attack damage is doubled. Blocking. Level this by blocking to be better at blocking by increasing your armor class through the ceiling. It won't save you from magic though, unless you have a shield that specifically blocks magic and you max the skill out so that your shields become unbreakable. Just like you. Ranged. Level this by using ranged weapons to get better at ranged weapons. Melee weapon skills, unarmed, swords, polearms, axes, and maces. Level these to have your weapons degrade less, do more damage, and eventually you deal even more damage and apply it a debilitating status effect depending on the weapon. This skill list is long enough and short enough to make leveling interesting and not too tedious. This game has the perfect amount of crunchiness for what it is. And on top of that, it gives players a challenge steep enough and inviting enough to warrant diving into the mechanics more. It's truly great. If you play this game at some point, pro tip, I highly recommend throwing on a YouTube video and just chilling in the water for a bit after you've cleared out a floor with water in it to max out your swimming skill. It is invaluable in the late game. It's the only skill that forces you to step away from the normal game loop and sort of take a bit of a break. So go take a break. I say embrace it. Go watch some Philly D or some shit, I don't know. Leveling these skills gives you XP for your character levels, so it's extremely worthwhile to do. The more leveled you are, the more likely you will see the end of the story. Speaking of... As mentioned earlier, this is Beer and Pretzels D&D. We aren't really here for the story. We're here to fight bosses, and that's what we're gonna do. There is actually a little story here happening that is straight up just a D&D one-shot idea. There's an evil lich, which is basically an undead wizard, named Baron Herx, who is currently terrorizing the world. So heroes from all around are going to his lair to try and stop him, the vast majority of whom are failing. That's where you come in. Ideally, you won't fail. The neat thing about this game and D&D one-shots similar and the like, is that you playing this game as many times as it takes to succeed and defeat Baron Herx and the evil entities that are behind him named Orpheus and Eurydice, which are kind of like they're kind of a weird rip-off of Greek myth. I don't know what's going on there, but whatever. You playing the game is doing the world building and the storytelling of all the heroes who came and failed to save the world before you. Every time you enter the dungeon, Baron Herx talks to you telepathically, mocking you, as he does every hero that enters his lair. It's the perfect, stereotypical D&D villain. The voice acting in this game it's not good. It's not good. But honestly, I feel like it's kind of part of the game's charm, you know? It reminds me of sitting around a table with my friends, who are not all nerdy-ass voice actors, and just playing through a dungeon that one of them built to test the table. Whatever, it's a holiday. Somebody made a one-shot. Let's play through it. Let's spend time together. Let's have some fun, you know? It just reminds me of that. So yeah, voice acting bad, but in a strange way, good. While yes, I'm not super invested in the story of Barony. What story is here is one of the many parts that gives this game its playful charm. Also, a super fun touch that lets you not get invested in your characters as much because you know you're gonna die, is the random name generator that has a long list of potential names, ranging from the names of epic heroes like Ian, Son of Fire, to pun names like Robin Yu, to goober names like Scoot of Doot Loot. Seeing the text that Scoot of Doot Loot got slimed or splattered by a boulder is something that's just objectively hilarious, and God, this game's good. As you've likely put together from the game footage in this video, as well as me mentioning this at the start, this game's graphics are, much like the game itself, a mixture of Doom and Minecraft tossed in a D&D setting. Graphics are not super important in a game's quality. I am a firm believer that art style transcends graphics every time, and this game has a great art style. Big blocky landscapes and pixelated characters and items. The UI in this game is also really good. It gives you everything you need while playing, and right-clicking on things lets you know what you can do with them. One specific UI design thing I really like with Barony is how all of the character information is presented to you. It's done through a digital version of a Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. Because of the quality of the game's UI and just sort of the ease of learning this game through trying and failing over and over again, the only thing that I would really have to look up to learn how to actually play and maybe get some tips on is how the DLC Brewer class works. That shit is actual rocket surgery. Tangent. This also speaks to how good the tutorials are, and there are many, but you don't have to play them all if you don't want to. They'll teach you a thing, but then they'll challenge you. To sum it up, the visuals are basic but effective, and they maintain this good pixelated art style that is very much so reminiscent of old boomer shooters in Minecraft. Barony is a really fun, difficult, and charming classic RPG experience that it is clear that the developers had a lot of fun making. When you can tell that the developers had a lot of fun making the game, it just feels right, you know? Like Baldur's Gate 3. That game feels so right. The developers were truly inspired by what they were making. The game costs $25.99 Canadian, and it goes on sale quite frequently, and it ends up costing around half that. So definitely wishlist it if you are interested. I highly recommend this game to anybody who likes classic RPG gameplay that you can really dive into if you want. Or if you just want to play a fun game for the sake of it, I say go for it. Hello! Thank you so much for watching the video. It means the world. Have you played Barony? Have you played Dungeons & Dragons or another tabletop role-playing game? If so, what is your favorite tabletop role-playing game? My personal favorite is the Call of Cthulhu RPG. I love that game. Let me know down below. And also, let me know your thoughts on this video. Speaking of videos, what a crazy past few weeks. The Zomboid video.
Holy shit.
Dude. That's fucking crazy. Thank you to everyone who watched, commented, liked, and subscribed in the past few weeks. That is an insane number. That's ridiculous. this one video has allowed me to become a part of the YouTube Partner Program, which is also crazy. Like, I'm probably not gonna be making any money doing this, you know, because most of my videos have copyrighted music in them, and I'm not changing the edits, I like them too much. But regardless, this last month has been a wild ride, to say the least, and I have all of you to thank for that, and for your ongoing support. I truly could not do this without all your support, all of your encouraging comments, and I appreciate it greatly. With all that said, thank you again so much for watching. Stay safe out there. And I hope you had a relaxing holiday. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.